The cartographer noticed it first. Not a ship, not a weapon, an absence, a specific shape of missing starlight in a sector the treaty maps labeled surveyed and cleared. She ran the calculation 4 times before she filed the report, and each time the numbers came back identical. Something the size of a small moon was sitting in the dark approximately 2.3 light-years past the outer boundary, blocking a constellation of background stars with the geometric precision that only manufactured objects produce. She flagged it Category 7, anomalous obstruction, not Category 9, military asset. That distinction would matter later. Her name was Vane Sa of the Cartographic Directorate, and in her 43 years of charting the dead margins of claimed space, she had never once filed a report that kept her awake afterward. She filed this one. Then she lay in the dark of her quarters aboard the survey vessel * Persistent Inquiry. *, and she thought about the shape of that absence, and she did not sleep. 3 weeks earlier, Fleet Admiral Counselor Drainmost had stood in the grand chamber of the hegemony and delivered what he privately considered the finest speech of his political career. The humans, he said, have complied. The chamber erupted. It was, by any reasonable measure, a stunning achievement. The Hegemony Compact had issued the disarmament decree 14 months prior, the formal legal instrument requiring humanity's Terran sovereignty to decommission, surrender, or publicly destroy all warship assets above Class 3 displacement within 18 standard months. The decree had been issued following the Cathara incident, when a human patrol vessel had opened fire on a hegemony inspection team it apparently mistook for hostile boarders. 3 inspectors dead, 1 human crew member dead. A diplomatic catastrophe that the hegemony had leveraged, efficiently, decisively, into the legal framework they had been carefully constructing for 11 years. The decree was not technically a punishment. It was technically a * security measure. And the humans had signed it. More than signed it. They had provided full compliance documentation, coordinates of every decommissioned vessel, certification records, visual confirmation feeds of warships being stripped, their drives going cold, their weapons systems dismantled and catalogued. Hegemony verification teams had toured 3 separate decommissioning yards and filed reports so thorough and so * boring in their confirmation of human compliance that 3 of the verification officers had requested reassignment to more interesting postings afterward. Drainmost knew all of this. He had supervised it personally. He had watched the human representative, a small woman named Director Ama Osimensa, with very still eyes and a habit of clasping her hands on the table in front of her as though she was cold, sign every document without hesitation, without negotiation, without the kind of carefully concealed resentment that most species displayed when compelled to surrender military capacity. She had signed. She had smiled briefly. She had thanked the Council for the * opportunity to demonstrate humanity's commitment to regional stability. Those words had seemed gracious at the time. Drainmost would think about them differently later. But in the Grand Chamber on the day he announced compliance, he thought about nothing except the applause. 14 months of pressure, monitoring, and political architecture, and the humans had simply * folded. He allowed himself, privately, to conclude that humanity was not the threat some of his colleagues had feared. He was wrong about that. He was wrong in a way that would take him approximately 4 more months to fully understand, and understanding it would change him in ways he never entirely recovered from. The first mystery Vane Sa's report created was simple. What was the object? The second mystery was more uncomfortable. How long had it been there? Because when she cross-referenced her sensor logs against the historical cartographic archive, a process that took 6 days, and the assistance of 2 data analysts who asked no questions because her expression discouraged them, she found something that made her sit very still at her terminal for a long time. The background star occlusion pattern was not new. The oldest archive scan she could find that covered that specific coordinate region was 41 years old. A routine pass by a survey drone on a long mapping circuit, the kind of data that accumulated in archives and was never manually reviewed because the sector was flagged empty. The object had been there for at least 41 years. Possibly longer. She pulled her tea closer without drinking it and stared at her screen and thought, the humans signed the disarmament decree 14 months ago. Whatever was sitting in the dark 2 light years past the outer boundary, they had put it there long before the hegemony had ever imagined asking them to give up their ships. The third mystery was the one she almost didn't write down, because writing it down made it real. If humans hid something that large 41 years ago, what else did they hide and where? She filed her report. She used Category 7. She did not sleep again for 2 days. Drain Most received Vane Saw's report on a Tuesday morning. Hegemony Standard Calendar, 3rd cycle, 47th day, and he read it the way powerful men read reports that threaten comfortable conclusions, quickly, with irritation, looking for the error. This is a cartographic anomaly, he said, setting the report down. Natural object, large rogue body, irregular surface creating the occlusion effect. His aide, a young official named Perdee Hall who had excellent political instincts and the survival sense to deploy them carefully, said nothing. Schedule a verification pass, Drain Most added. Standard protocol, no urgency classification. Of course, said Perdee Hall. And if I might, the cartographer who filed the report has requested that her name be withheld from any formal follow-up communications. Drain Most looked up from his desk. Why? She didn't say. He thought about that briefly. Then, granted, anomalous obstruction verification pass, standard protocol, nothing else. The verification vessel * careful assessment departed 6 days later. It carried 8 crew members, a full sensor suite, and orders that Drain Most had personally reviewed and deliberately * not * escalated to military classification. Careful assessment reached the coordinates 22 days after departure. Its first sensor sweep lasted 40 seconds before the communication came through. Not a distress signal, not a weapons lock, a * hail. Calm, formal, transmitted on standard hegemony diplomatic frequencies, which meant, and this detail would haunt Perdee Hall specifically for the rest of his career, that whoever sent it knew exactly which frequency to use. The voice was human. The language was hegemony standard, which humans had been speaking for less than 30 years. The accent was almost imperceptible. Careful assessment, the voice said. This is a restricted zone. Please hold your position and state your authorization. The commander of * careful assessment, a career survey officer named Malas who had never once in his life encountered something for which his training hadn't prepared him, sat in his command chair for 11 full seconds before he responded. This is Hegemony Survey Vessel * careful assessment operating on Directorate authorization. We are conducting a standard verification pass of a cataloged anomaly. Please identify yourself and your vessel. A pause, slightly too long to be casual. This is Warden Station 7. You are in proximity to a protected asset. Please transmit your authorization code. Malas did not have an authorization code. He had survey coordinates and a standard protocol order from Counselor Drain Most's office. He transmitted those. Another pause. Your authorization is insufficient for this proximity classification. Please withdraw to a minimum distance of 0.4 light years and contact the relevant coordinating office to obtain appropriate clearance. Malas stared at his communications officer. His communications officer stared back. What, said Malas very quietly, is the relevant coordinating office? The human voice gave him a name, a department, and a contact identifier, all formatted in perfect hegemony administrative structure, all completely unfamiliar. Then the channel closed. Careful assessment withdrew. Malas filed his report in a state of controlled professional composure that he maintained for approximately 2 hours after transmission. At which point, he went to his private quarters and sat on his bunk and thought about the fact that a human voice had just told him, politely and without any apparent concern, that he needed clearance to approach an uncharted object in hegemony-claimed space. Warden Station 7, he said aloud to no one. If it was Station *7, he thought, then presumably there was a Station 1 through 6. Presumably. The report reached Drainmoth's desk 8 days later, flagged *urgent, awaiting reclassification. He read it 3 times, then he called Père D. Hall. Get me the human directorate liaison, not the standard channel, the direct line. Which human? Père D. Hall asked. Osimensa. A silence. She's listed as retired, sir, since approximately the sound of records being accessed 4 months after the disarmament decree was signed. Drainmoth set down his tea carefully. Find me whoever replaced her. There's a listed successor, a Director Callum Reyes. He's been responsive on standard channels regarding the compliance certification process. Set the meeting. The meeting happened the next day, via secure diplomatic link. Director Reyes appeared on screen looking like a man who had slept recently and eaten a good breakfast and had absolutely nothing to be concerned about. He had gray at his temples and a way of listening with his entire face that Drainmoth found, suddenly and irrationally, deeply unsettling. Counselor, he said, I understand there's been a confusion regarding a survey pass. There has, said Drainmoth. A hegemony survey vessel encountered a human facility in unclaimed space beyond the outer boundary and was instructed to request clearance before approaching. I would like an explanation. Reyes nodded slowly, as though this was a perfectly reasonable request that he had been expecting. Of course. The facility in question is a deep space monitoring station, operating under the Outer Boundary Preservation Compact, which, I believe, was a framework the hegemony itself endorsed in the 3rd cycle of negotiations, as a mechanism for maintaining observation of the unclaimed transit corridors. Drainmoth said nothing. He did know about the Outer Boundary Preservation Compact. It was a minor administrative framework, mostly concerned with navigation hazard reporting. He had never imagined it was being used to justify anything of this scale. A monitoring station, he said. Several, yes, said Reyes. Several. The * careful assessment reported a structure approximately. We can provide full technical specifications, Reyes said smoothly, through the relevant coordinating office, to which I believe your survey vessel was directed. Your * monitoring stations, said Drainmoth, choosing each word as if it were a navigational hazard. Were they included in the compliance certification submitted under the disarmament decree? Reyes clasped his hands on the table in front of him. It was the exact same gesture Director Osimensa had used when she signed the documents. Counselor, he said, the disarmament decree pertained to warship assets above Class 3 displacement. Monitoring stations are not warships. They are civilian administrative infrastructure. I'm certain if you review the decree language, you'll find the distinction is quite clear. The meeting ended 40 minutes later with a diplomatic agreement to exchange technical documentation through appropriate channels and a joint commitment to clarifying the precise scope of the Outer Boundary Preservation Compact framework. Drainmoth sat alone in his office for a long time after the screen went dark. He pulled up the disarmament decree. He read it from the beginning, for the first time in 14 months, the way a man reads a contract after he suspects he has been deceived, slowly, carefully, looking for the specific language that should have protected him. The language was clear, unambiguous: warship assets, Class 3 displacement, decommission, surrender, or destroy. Monitoring stations were not mentioned. Neither were asterisk shipyards. Neither were asterisk fuel depots. Neither were asterisk crew hibernation facilities. Neither were, and this was the line that stopped him entirely, the line he read 4 times, the line that made the whole structure of the past 14 months rearrange itself in his mind: military assets maintained in a non-operational status for preservation purposes. He thought about a human woman with very still eyes, sitting across a negotiating table, reading every word of this decree before she signed it. He thought about her thanking them for the asterisk opportunity to demonstrate humanity's commitment. He thought about the word asterisk demonstrate. He thought about what you demonstrate and what you asterisk conceal asterisk, and how a species smart enough to do both simultaneously might look, from the outside, exactly like a species that had simply folded. The Hegemony Intelligence Directorate took 3 weeks to compile what it privately designated the Topology Report, an attempt to map the full extent of what humans had built, or hidden, or preserved, in the spaces between the stars that no one had thought to watch carefully. 3 weeks was not enough time. The preliminary version of the Topology Report, which Drainmost received on an encrypted channel with a classification level he had not previously used in his career, contained 47 confirmed anomalies across the boundary region. 14 had already been identified as human-administered facilities of one kind or another. The remaining 33 were pending investigation. He called his senior analysis team into his office and closed the door. "How long," he said, "would it take to build 47 facilities in deep space?" The senior analyst, a methodical woman named Vaincos who had no relation to the cartographer Vane, saw despite sharing a prefix, said, "That depends significantly on what the facilities are. Assume they're large. Then decades at minimum, depending on when construction began. We have archival evidence suggesting at least 41 years. The room was quiet. "Counselor," said Vaincos, "humans have only had reliable deep space transit capability for approximately 60 years. "I know. Which means—" "I know," he said again. It meant the humans had started building almost the moment they developed the capability, before they had ever encountered the hegemony, before the Cathara incident, before the disarmament decree or the negotiations that preceded it, or the 11 years of diplomatic architecture that Drainmost had spent a significant portion of his career constructing. They had gone straight from reaching the stars to asterisk hiding things among them. "They planned for this," said Perdie Hall quietly from the back of the room. No one argued with him. Vane received a second assignment 6 weeks after her original report, not from the Cartographic Directorate this time, from an office whose name she didn't recognize, with an authorization code that cleared every standard security layer on her vessel systems, with a kind of frictionless ease that told her the office was significantly more important than its anonymous name suggested. Her orders were simple: complete a thorough cartographic survey of 3 specific coordinate sectors. File all results through the new authorization channel, not through the directorate. Speak to no one about the assignment. She was 3 days into the first sector when she found the second object. This one wasn't occluding starlight. It was emitting, asterisk very faintly, in a frequency band her standard equipment almost didn't catch. A soft, regular pulse, 12 seconds apart, that she would have cataloged as background radiation noise if she hadn't been specifically looking for anomalies. She ran the frequency analysis. She ran it again. It matched no natural source in the catalog. It matched no hegemony-manufactured source either. What it did match, and this was the moment she understood, viscerally and completely, What she had walked into the middle of was a human emergency beacon. Modified, subdued to barely above sensor threshold, cycling on a pattern that would only be recognizable if you knew precisely what to look for. It was a signal. Not to her, not to the hegemony, to someone who was already out here and already knew the pattern. She sat at her console and looked at the blinking frequency readout and thought, with the very particular clarity that comes from having your entire understanding of a situation replaced in a single moment. The stations weren't just hidden. They were talking to each other. She reported it. The response came back in 4 hours, faster than anything from the anonymous office had moved before, with 2 additional orders and a single clarifying note that had clearly been written by someone senior enough to not bother softening their language. The note said, "Do not attempt to decode the signal pattern. Do not transmit on any adjacent frequency. Continue survey and report all detections. The pattern you have found is one of at least 9 distinct communication variants currently identified." 9. She read that number twice. Then she thought about the shape of what 9 communication variants implied, the redundancy, the planning, the sheer organizational scale of maintaining 9 separate signal architectures across an area of space that the hegemony had considered empty. And she understood, in a way that settled into her bones rather than her mind, that the hegemony had not disarmed humanity. They had convinced humanity to let them watch the decommissioning. Whatever was out here had never been part of the inventory. Drain Most requested a meeting with the full Security Council in the 48th day of the 3rd cycle. He had spent 11 days preparing for it, not the political preparation, the personal preparation. The kind you do when you are about to walk into a room and tell a group of powerful people something that will make them afraid, and you need to be further ahead of the fear than they are. He presented the topology report. He presented the signal analysis. He presented a legal review compiled by 4 separate offices, all of which arrived at the same conclusion. Nothing the humans had done violated the explicit language of the disarmament decree. Nothing. The chamber was quiet in a way chambers full of politicians are very rarely quiet. "They negotiated the loopholes," said one counselor finally. "They didn't need to negotiate them," said Drain Most. "They were already present in our draft. We wrote the decree. They simply," he paused because the word he wanted was accepted, but that wasn't precisely right. "They simply didn't correct our assumptions." Another silence. "What are the facilities?" asked another counselor. "What are they for?" "We don't know yet. The ones we've been able to scan at range suggest a mix of purposes. Some appear to be storage. Some appear to have life support signatures suggesting crew capacity. Some," he brought up the relevant data, "appear to be dry docks." The word landed in the room like a dropped weapon. A dry dock was where you built ships, or where you kept them in a state that was not quite operational, non-operational status for preservation purposes, exactly the language in the decree that had stopped him cold. "How many ships?" asked the counselor who'd spoken first. "We don't know." "What class?" "We don't know." "How long have they been preserved?" Drain Most looked at the report on the table in front of him. "Based on archival scan data, the oldest facility we've confirmed appears to have been constructed approximately 53 years ago." He paused. 6 years after humanity's first successful deep space transit. The room processed that. "They have been hiding a fleet," said a counselor in the back, "for longer than most of this council has been in office." "We don't know with certainty that it's a fleet." "What else would you preserve in a dry dock for 50 years? Drain Most had no answer for that. He had spent 11 days looking for one. The communication from the Terran sovereignty arrived 3 days after the Security Council meeting, as though the humans had somehow known the meeting had happened. And this was a thought Drainmost caught himself having and then deliberately suppressed, because following it to its logical end was not something he was ready for, they possibly had. It was addressed directly to the Security Council, formal, measured, concise. It expressed concern about recent unauthorized proximity events involving hegemony survey vessels approaching Terran deep space infrastructure, and requested clarification of the hegemony's intentions regarding the outer boundary region. It was signed by Director Reyes. Drainmost read the message twice. Then he read it a third time, this time paying attention not to what it said but to what it implied. The humans were not panicking. They were not apologizing. They were not scrambling to explain or conceal or negotiate. They were requesting clarification. As though the hegemony were the party that had done something unexpected. He called Père D. Hall. I need everything we have on Director Reyes, everything on Osimensa, everything on how the human compliance documentation was prepared, who prepared it, what legal staff was involved. That will take time. I know start tonight. Père D. Hall started that night. He worked for 6 days and assembled a document that he then sat with for another full day before he delivered it, because some of what it contained he wanted to think about carefully before he handed it to someone with the authority to act on it. The central finding was this. The compliance documentation for the disarmament decree had been prepared by a Terran legal team of 43 people over a period of 14 months, which meant they had begun preparing the compliance documentation before the decree was formally issued, working from draft language that had been circulating in hegemony diplomatic channels. They had obtained the draft. They had studied it. They had found, cataloged, and strategically preserved every gap in its language, not by inserting the gaps, which would have been fraud, but by ensuring that nothing they did filled them. And then they had signed it, graciously, without hesitation. Père D. Hall delivered the document to Drainmost's office at the 7th hour of the 42nd day. He set it on the desk. He sat down across from his superior without being invited to. They didn't hide the fleet because of the decree, Père D. Hall said. They hid the fleet and then arranged for the decree to not cover it. Drainmost looked at the document. Yes. They wanted us to issue the decree. A silence. I think, said Drainmost slowly, that they wanted us to believe we had disarmed them. Why? He didn't answer right away. He was thinking about a woman with very still eyes who had thanked them for the opportunity to demonstrate something. He was thinking about the word demonstrate and what it meant to demonstrate compliance, not capability, not strength, but specifically and deliberately the appearance of surrender. Because, he said finally, a species that appears to have surrendered its weapons is not watched the same way as a species that is known to still have them. Père D. Hall sat with that. They made themselves look smaller, he said. Yes. While building something larger. Yes. And we, Père D. Hall stopped. We helped them, said Drainmost. We gave them the decree. We told them exactly what we were watching for. We certified their compliance. We announced to the entire hegemony that humanity had folded. He set the document down. We published the inventory of everything they did surrender, which means every species in the hegemony now knows precisely what humans gave up, and no one is looking for what they kept. The room was very quiet. Outside, through the high office windows, the lights of the capital district spread outward for kilometers in every direction. Administrative buildings, council chambers, trade offices, the vast comfortable machinery of a civilization that had not needed to fear anything, genuinely fear it, for a very long time. Drainmost looked at it. He thought about the shape of an absence in a star field, the way something enormous can hide by simply being somewhere you aren't looking. How many facilities total? He asked. Current estimate, pending verification of the remaining 33 anomalies. Per D. Hall checked his notes. Between 80 and 110. Drainmost closed his eyes briefly. And we have no idea what's in most of them. No. And the signal network they're using to communicate. 9 variants identified. Analysts believe there may be more. He opened his eyes. Have we attempted to contact them, the stations directly, not through diplomatic channels? Twice. Both times we were routed back to the relevant coordinating office. The relevant coordinating office. The name that the voice on the asterisk careful assessment communication had provided, formatted perfectly in hegemony administrative structure, belonging to a department that, he had checked, did not appear in any Terran sovereignty public record. Find out what that office actually is, he said. Per D. Hall nodded and then paused at the door. Counselor. If they did all of this, the facilities, the signals, the legal preparation, all of it, planned it for 50 years. Yes. What are they waiting for? Drainmost had no answer. He had asked himself the same question for 16 days, approached it from every angle his political experience could supply, and arrived each time at the same place. He didn't know. And not knowing, in a situation this size, was its own species of fear. The topology report's full version was completed 40 days after the preliminary. It identified, with high confidence, 104 distinct human facilities in the deep space sectors beyond the outer boundary. 61 were in non-hegemony space. 43 were in regions that fell, by various interpretations of various compacts and boundary agreements, within what the hegemony considered its administrative zone. The legal implications of 43 human facilities operating within hegemony-claimed space, under the coverage of a minor navigational compact, were, as the senior legal analyst phrased it in her summary, with the careful understatement of someone trying not to alarm a document that would be read by frightened politicians, asterisk complex. The military implications were noted in a separate classified annex that Drainmost read alone. He read it twice. Then he called for Vainsa. She arrived at the capital 3 days later, still carrying the particular worn-down composure of someone who has spent too long in a survey vessel thinking about things too large for enclosed spaces. She sat across from him in his office and clasped her hands in her lap and looked at him with the patient attention of someone who had already decided to say what they had come to say. You found something else, he said, not a question. In the 3rd sector, she said, after my formal report was filed, I kept the scan running. And she placed a data chip on his desk. The dry dock in Sector 3 doesn't just have a ship inside it. It has a full operational crew. I detected crew movement signatures, thermal patterns consistent with regular activity, communication traffic that falls outside the 9 known signal variants. She paused. The facility has been continuously crewed for what our thermal history analysis suggests is at least 12 years. Drainmost stared at the data chip. They're not preserving the ships, she said quietly. They're maintaining them, training on them. The dry docks aren't storage. She looked at him steadily. They're bases. The word settled between them. He picked up the data chip. Why are you telling me this directly? Why not through the authorization channel? Because, she said, the authorization channel routed my last 3 extended survey reports to a queue with a 72-hour processing delay. And 2 days ago, I found something in the 2nd sector that I don't think should wait 72 hours. He said nothing, he waited. There's a human ship operating on a transit heading that takes it toward hegemony core space, she said. Not toward the boundary, toward the core. Single vessel, minimal emissions profile, running what I can only describe as a passive observation pattern. A pause. It's been on that heading for 19 days. Based on the trajectory, it passes within sensor range of the hegemony capital system in approximately 6 weeks. She was quiet for a moment. Counselor, they've been watching us build this investigation. They know we found the facilities. And now they have a ship heading toward our capital that will be in observation range before we've finished understanding what we're looking at. Drainmost set the data chip down very carefully on his desk, as though sudden movement might make something worse. "They're not threatening us," he said. "It wasn't quite a question." "No, it's a single unarmed observation vessel." "Then what?" "They're asterisk showing us that they can," she said. "That's all. They're not making a move. They're letting us see the board." He looked at her. She held his gaze. "Counselor," she said very quietly, "I have been doing this for 43 years. I have charted empty space and found natural wonders and the occasional embarrassing administrative error, and exactly nothing that I could not explain by the time my report was filed." A pause. "I cannot explain this. I cannot explain the scale of it, or the patience of it, or the fact that they have had a century of capability to use this and they have not. You think they're afraid of escalation?" She shook her head. "I think they're not afraid of anything." The distinction was one he had not considered, and it landed in him like a depth charge. The particular way terrible things settle when they finally find the bottom. A species that calculates fear might be deterred. A species that builds a century-long contingency plan not as desperation, but as asterisk preference. Not because they were certain they would need it, but because they found the building of it reasonable. That was something else entirely. They had not hidden the fleet, because they were afraid of what the hegemony would do. They had hidden the fleet because hiding it was what they did. The same way they persisted and adapted and kept moving long after any reasonable calculation said stop. They had read the disarmament decree not as a threat, but as an asterisk problem the way they read every problem. Find what it covers. Find what it doesn't. Build in the space between. Sign the parts you can sign. Thank them for the opportunity. Continue. The observation vessel reached sensor range of the capital system 41 days later. It did not transmit. It did not maneuver aggressively. It ran its passive observation pattern and it watched, with the particular patience of a species that had been building something quietly for 50 years and was not in any hurry to explain it. The Security Council voted on 3 separate proposed responses over the course of 8 days. The first 2 proposals failed. The third was tabled when the legal office confirmed, for the 4th time, that nothing the humans had done violated any standing agreement. On the 9th day, Director Reyes sent a brief, courteous message requesting a meeting at the convenience of the Hegemony Council to discuss the evolving cooperative framework in the outer boundary region. Drainmost read the message in his office, alone, at the close of an extremely long day. Outside, the capital city glittered. The council chamber where he had once stood and announced the finest achievement of his political career was 3 buildings to the east, dark at this hour. He thought about that speech. He thought about the applause. He thought about 41 years of careful darkness, and 9 signal variants, and 104 facilities, and 1 woman with very still eyes thanking him for the asterisk opportunity. He drafted a response accepting the meeting. Then he sat back in his chair and looked at nothing in particular for a while, and thought about what it would feel like to be the kind of species that, when handed a decree designed to neutralize you, read it once, identified every gap, built an empire in the negative space, and then thanked you for the opportunity to demonstrate your compliance. He thought about all the space between stars that no one had checked carefully. He thought about what it meant that the humans had checked it first. He thought about the observation vessel, sitting in sensor range of his capital, watching and not speaking, the way something watches when it knows it has already won the argument and is simply waiting for the other party to finish arriving at that conclusion on their own. The hegemony was not the strongest civilization in this region of the galaxy. They had resources, numbers, political architecture built across centuries. They had never imagined needing to fear a species 60 years out from its first transit drive. But strength, he understood now, was not the variable that mattered. What mattered was which civilization, when told to stop, looked at the language of the instruction, and quietly, patiently, without drama or declaration, found everything the words didn't cover, and then kept building in the dark. The humans were not the most powerful species humanity had ever encountered. They were the species that, given 50 years and the illusion that no one was watching, had ensured they